I need a TIG holder for my setup. As you can see, it falls down. How I'm thinking about doing this is I like these yellow ones. I'll throw one up on screen real quick so you can look at it. I like the shape of that. I want to do something like that, but I want it to be more of a learning process for me, so I'm going to make it harder. And I don't have any flat bar, and I'm not trying to cut it out, so I have this idea. I'm going to take this little chunk of aluminum right here, and these magnets, and I'm going to jump over on my lathe. So this is going to be a lathe project. Well, my lathe is back there. I'm going to jump over on my lathe. I'm going to put a hole through the middle that I can set these two in there. I think these will be strong enough, I hope. And then I'm going to super glue those in there, and then I'm going to kind of clean it up and make it look nice. And that'll be a nice magnetic base for it. Boom, that'll just go right there. This is all made out of aluminum, by the way. And then I have all this rod over here. So I have a bunch of rod. I don't really have any flat stock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve it. I'm going to bend rod, and I'm going to make it to where it kind of holds my TIG torch that way. And so kind of what I'm thinking is it's going to look like this. I'm going to have this base, which is 6061 right here. And then this is, I'm going to make it mostly out of the 53, whatever. It's a little harder aluminum wire. And then it's going to kind of come out like this to where like the center of gravity of this thing is kind of like right over this is kind of what I'm planning. And then it's going to come over and it's going to essentially hook like this to where it'll hold out here kind of like that, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and then I'm going to kind of curve this. I'm going to take one main piece, I'm going to curve it around, and then I'm going to weld that into place, and I got some really thin rod to help with that. And then once I do the thick rod, then I'm going to take even thinner rod, I'm going to fill it in with that. And then I'm thinking if I'm feeling really ambitious, I might take some of my really thin rod and then go in between that. And so I'm looking, so what I want to do is I want to start off with a big rod and then thin rod, and then I'm going to make this kind of crazy skeleton looking structure on it that should be, when it's all said and done, because it's so supported all the way through, it should actually be really strong, but it'll be really wispy and cool looking. That's what I want to do. I want to make something kind of cool, and that'll test my skills that I don't really have. So it essentially forced me to learn how to weld this thin shit. And yeah, so let's jump over to the lathe and get started on that. So I got these guys in here. This is really kind of not the piece to make this out of, but I'm super cheap, so I'm gonna try to use it and we'll see what happens. But I got just enough lip to kind of grab onto it there, and I got it in there pretty tight, and then this part will get machined away, so it won't be an issue, and then I'll kind of end up grabbing it. So I got it sticking out about the width of the two magnets I want, which is about what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, I'm going to face this off, I'm going to clean it up, and then I will do some turning, and just enough to get this clean, because I'm pretty happy with the diameter. I don't really want it too much smaller than that. So I'm just going to clean it up this way, and then I'll come in and I'm going to drill a little bit of a pilot hole, and then I'm going to come in with my boring bar, which I'm going to build. I'm going to have to grind out a steel boring bar, because my boring bar is really big and doesn't really fit in there, so it's for bigger stuff. So I'm going to need a smaller boring bar to get in there, so I'm going to kind of just shape it out of a small piece of steel that I have laying around, a small piece of tool steel from when I got the lathe. So I'm going to try to grind it out of that, and that'll give me, it doesn't need to be super deep, as you can tell, so it shouldn't be too difficult. And then after that, this 3-jaw has about 5 thou of wobble in it, so when I put it in there, it'll be fine, and I can cut all this really true, but then if I try to take it and flip it and put it back in, it'll be wobbling. So then I'll take it, I'll put on the 4-jaw, I'll grab it, I'll center it up real solid, and then I'll flip over and then I'll clean up the other side. I might add like a little bit of a dome to it with a file, something like that. It's kind of what I'm thinking as a kind of a cool thing to start welding on and give it just a little bit more shape. But that's kind of the idea. Alright, now I have a little black mark, which I'm sure you guys won't be able to see on camera, but there's a little black mark right there, and I'm going to go in just till it starts to disappear, and this hole is not even, so what we're probably going to see is, hopefully it's not too bad, but that bit's going to wobble. That's okay, because I'm not drilling all this through. I'm just trying to pull out a little bit of that material so I can get in there with a boring bar and just not have to go all the way to the center, just to make my life a little bit easier. So I'm just going to go in a little bit with this, not super far, and it's going to wobble, but it's not the end of the world. So what I'm going to do here, or attempt to do here, is I'm going to take a piece of steel like this. I think I'm going to take this one. Let me get this out real quick. Actually, I'm going to leave it in there because it illustrates a point. But there's a piece of steel in there, a piece of tool steel right in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this down. And so I'm going to take the tip. This is the profile right here, right? And so it's going to be cutting over here on the inside, but you won't be able to see it. So I have it like this. So what I want to do is I want to take it and I want to put it in my grinder. And I don't have a proper grinder for this. I'm going to literally chuck it into a, well, you'll see. And then I'm going to take the corner down on this. I'm going to round that down, put a radii on this, but I'm going to use this one in here. And then the idea is it really only needs to stick, I only need to take it down and radius it up to about right there. So I'm going to radius it up to about there, and that'll keep it from hitting the wall. Because what you want to do is you're cutting this shape into a component. So the negative of this is you want to come in and it's going to cut over here on this side. So you want to come in and you want to cut out all the material, and then I'm going to chuck it in the lathe towards a little angled like this, so I don't have to worry about taking material off behind it like you would do like a real boring bar. But I'm just going to angle it a little bit to cheat, and then I'm going to stick it in there just like that. And I'm going to use, and you just want to be cutting right at one point. So right here on the very tip, which is going to be ground to a solid point. That's all I want to do. I don't want to be cutting with any of the rest of the thing. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grind that in, and I'll show you how I do that, which is super ghetto. Alright, you might not be able to hear me that well because I have a mask on, but doing this in this ghetto-ass way. I got a cup of water here to keep it cool as I go. And I'm going to start by making the top of this, and then I'm going to put that radius on there. So what I did here is I had this and I was just holding it, and I cleaned up the top up here. So I cleaned up this top area up here and just did that by holding it flat like this with the glove on, just like that, just held it there and then grinded it down. And then I took it and I was just holding it like this, a little bit more solid, a little bit more like this. And I was just grabbing it and I was just rolling it like that, and that gave me a nice radius there, which may or may not come up on camera, but I think that looks like a pretty good profile. I think it'll work. If it ends up not working and hitting, well, you can bring it back to the grinder and try to clean it up. But I think it's gonna work. And then I have a glass of water here, and I would just dip it in there to keep it from getting like 1,000,000 degrees, because you don't want to ruin the hardness of this by heating it up too much. So I like to keep it cool by doing that. Okay, so I got it in here. It's not amazing, but I'm gonna give it a try. I got a black mark scribed in here, and that's less than the diameter of the magnets there, so it's a little bit smaller. So this, I'm gonna start here, and then that should give me plenty of room to pull it out and get a really solid fit on those magnets. So we're gonna give this a try and see what happens. Alright, it's a bit difficult to get the shot while I'm cutting because this tool is so close. But as you can see, there's a hole in there, right in the very center of the screen, and that tool is cutting in. So right now, kind of seems to be working. I'm about 200 thousandths of an inch in. I need to go about 398, so almost 400 thou in, so a little bit under a ½ inch. And so I'm going to keep going and see what happens. Alright, here's my nest right there. I was a little unsure how this steel is going to work, but it seems to have worked pretty well. There's the hole right there. So as you can see, that goes down in there pretty well, and looks about right, not quite deep enough, and I'm sure it's not quite wide enough either. Yep. So now what I need to do is I need to sneak up on it and make it wider and make it a little until I can fit in there, and then make sure it's deep enough too. And then we'll be on our way. I wanted to point out one thing. I was having trouble getting the steel in the middle. And I thought I was having trouble finding the hole, but what I did is I made a little bit of a nipple right there. And that's making it really hard for me to get the steel out. So apparently I didn't make that hole deep enough. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use this tool right here. I'm going to go in there and chuck it in. I'm going to bore out the center of that and break it out and just put a little indent there for me to attack and get through. Look at that, guys. We got the magnets in there. So maybe hard to tell, but that black thing right there is the magnet, and you can see here I just need to bring it out a little bit. I need to make the hole deeper, and then once I get that sitting flush, then I'll be done with this side. Well, it probably took more time than it needed to. It's not like a NASA part, so I think it would have been okay, but I got it, and it fits like fucking perfect in there. I mean, you can barely feel the ledge between the two. I'm not sure which one's higher. If it is, it's only a couple thousand. Whichever one is only higher by a couple thousandths of an inch. It looks really, really good. I mean, it's really smooth. So now what we need to do is we need to take this off, flip it around, put it in the forejaw, and then clean up this other side, and then we'll be done with that part. Okay, so I got this in the forejaw, and now I'm going to do a facing pass on this. I'm going to bring it down to the diameter I want. Then I'm going to clean up this side piece right here. And then I might try to bull it, like round it slightly. I might do that, or I might just leave it flat and put a chamfer on it and call it good. We'll see what happens. I'm going to start with the facing and getting it the right thickness that I want, and then we'll go from there. So I've decided I am going to try to give this a dome. I think it'll work better with the organic look I'm going with the wire design. It'll have, I think, a dome will look nicer with the movement of the wire. So I'm going to just take the file, I'm going to hit this, I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to try to turn it into a dome. Alright, that was going like insanely slow. So what I'm going to do now is I have the compound, which is this thing, at a slight taper. So it's going to be cutting 5 degrees. So if this was 0, or this was 90, this was 0, negative 5, I guess, this way. And I'm going to cut it that way. I'm going to start with 5, I'm going to see what happens, and then go from there. And my idea is to put a little bit of a taper in there and then finish it up with a file and get it nice and round. And I don't know, I've never done this before, so let's see what happens. Okay, if you can tell, I'm not so sure, but there, you can kind of tell a little bit, it looks like, but there is a 5-degree angle cut into that. So now what I think I'm going to do, come on, is do another, I'm going to take it 5 more, I'm going to go to 10, and then, so I'm going to go from 5 to 10, and I'm just going to do a little bit more, bring it in a little bit, and then I'm going to hit with a file and make it into a dome. Alright, we kind of got a dome, now I'm going to try to take the file to it. Put a nice chamfer in there, hit that with a file, and we're going to be done. Here's the fun part where we shine it up. And a little polish. Alright guys, so we did the machining on this today. This is the last of the machining. So if you came here to see TIG welding, that's what we're going to see. So I really like the way this came out. I think it looks pretty clean. There's like a little tiny nipple on this, which means that this little nipple means that my machine is either slightly too high or slightly too low. That's something I need to adjust. I haven't yet. I need to though. I don't know how it got out of whack. It just gets out of whack, I guess. But it looks pretty good. I've never done a dome like that before. It's very subtle. It's not very much, but it looks pretty good. There's about a half a thou where I think where I didn't quite get it completely lined up, and you can feel that on there, which is just annoying, not to get that to line up completely. So that's when I took it from the 3-jaw and flipped it to the 4-jaw. I guess I didn't get something quite aligned, or I guess from 3-jaw to 4-jaw. And there's like a little line there you can see, and it's not perfect. And I'm not sure why it was, because it was on my indicator, it was pretty close, but it's not. So I'm gonna get this thing washed up, wipe down with acetone, and then tomorrow I'm gonna start bending the wire and getting everything ready for that, and I'm gonna start TIGging tomorrow. But for you guys, it's gonna be just like that. Here I am, back in my garage, next day. I'm working on, oh man, that camera's tilted funky. There we go, much better. I'm working on the wiring today. So today, if you're here for welding, I'm actually going to be welding up this wire. Now, I worked on it yesterday, and I burned some, and it's really hot in my machine. It only drops down to 30 amps, and I really need to be able to go down to about 5 to weld this stuff. So this is going to be tricky. I'm going to be really just kind of hitting it like fast and hot, which is kind of a weird way to do it. It generally looks okay. It's sometimes not the most structural weld. So I don't know. Well, that's what I hear anyway. But I got pretty good penetration on this. I mean, this thing is welded all the way through. It's like pretty much melted out both. This is 2 pieces of wire that essentially have turned into 1 solid piece. Like, I mean, this is a solid thing now. So it's probably going to be a lot of like kind of almost tacking in a way, like psst, psst, psst. But I started off kind of drawing some sketches out, and I didn't really like the way it was going, so I think I'm just going to kind of feel it out. I have this idea for the prong, so I'm going to bend a prong and I'm going to wrap it around and I'm going to put these on the base, and then I have some ideas for some supports off of that, and then after I get to that point, I think I'm just going to kind of run with it. So let's start bending some wire and see where we get. Alright, now to start here, I'm going to start by marking this just roughly in the middle here, so about there. And I'm going to start by making the main loop that holds the torch. I'm going to start by bending it by hand, and then I have a hammer I can tap it out and really get that shape in there. So I'm going to start trying to bend it like that, and that looks pretty damn good. So I'm going to pull it just a little bit past here. There we go. That actually came out real nice without even using a hammer. This is a harder aluminum. This is a 5356, but they use for TIGging harder aluminums. If you want a harder joint, use this. So this is harder than the 40 grade stuff, which is a little softer. And by using the harder stuff, I should hopefully hold the thing a little bit better. So now I got that pretty close. I like that. So let me bring over the torch. So the torch will sit in there kind of like that, and I like the way that looks, I think. I'm going to open it up a little bit, I think, because it's kind of bending in. So now I want to come up to about here, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to bend these with pliers. I'm going to do these on a really hard radius back bend. Getting these straight. They're a little bit off sync with each other. There we go. So I'm just playing with the metal and really just kind of feeling it out as I work here. Now I'm going to grab that. I'm going to bend it. That. And then take it. Bend it a little further. Okay. And then like this, squeeze it tight. There we go. Huh. Well, apparently you can't bend that far. I must have work hardened it and it broke. That's a problem. Okay, I'm gonna try a trick I learned from Adam Savage when he was making his aluminum armor. So I got marker on here, and he was making it with Terry English. So I got this marker in here, and I'm just going to heat it up with the blowtorch until the marker disappears, and it's supposed to soften the aluminum up. And aluminum really runs heat, so I'm going to use a pair of pliers to do this. Maybe. There we go. It's just starting to leave now. And this is supposed to soften it, and then when it gets bent again, it'll work harden. But, yep, marker just disappeared, which means it should be soft. Never actually tried this before, I've just seen it done. Okay, I kind of quenched it. I hope that didn't affect it negatively. Let's try that same bend again now in this material, now that it's supposedly more soft, according to Terry English here. So I'm going to bring that thing as tight as I can and see if it'll break. Well, I'll be damned. It didn't seem to break. Look at that, it actually works. Cool, so that made it soft, and apparently I can get it, I mean, that's a pretty tight radius. I'm gonna squeeze it even harder just to see if I can get it to break. But that's probably as tight as I'd want to go. About as tight as I'd want to go. I could go a little tighter than that. I mean, that's about as tight as I would want to go on this. And that really marred up the edges too, so I might not even go that tight. But that's good to know. So apparently that annealing treatment works. Awesome. This material, it seems to be extruded, so it's possible, it's entirely possible that this material was work hardened before by being extruded, especially if it was cold rolled, and that would just be kind of pushing it to its thermal limits anyway. So by heating it back up, it kind of lets all the tensions inside of it relax, and then you get the softness back when you do that, and it loses brittleness. And then once we bend it around again, the good thing is that it'll get back to being hard again, and it'll become a hard material again. The nice thing about aluminum is it age hardens too, so this will get back to a stronger state over time. Generally, that's kind of something that happens with aluminum. So as this thing sits for, you know, who knows, months or so, it'll really settle in and get stronger. So now we'll do the entire piece so we can work with it. I had softer pliers for this. I need some pliers or something that don't have grip on them because it's biting into this metal and it's marring it. You can never have enough tools. So that works. That works great actually. So that's kind of right where I want that for now. I'm going to do the other one the exact same way. That looks uneven. That's what that looks like. Oh goodness. I did those right in the same spot, but for whatever reason they came out a little uneven. So the question is, do we just keep it and say, you know, I wonder if I can... Let me look at something here. Okay, so I adjusted it. Let me explain what I did. One of these sides was a little uneven, so what I did is I put it back on that, and then so I started with the side that was higher, and then I took it and I just bent it around the radius a little bit more, and then the side that was lower I just unbent it very slightly, and that got those pretty even. And then I'm just kind of finagling it by hand. Alright, yet another trick I learned from Adam Savage here. I'm going to try to... I'll put this in real tight to start with. Okay. Now, I'm going to try to put a little bit of a gentle bend in this by going kind of like that, you see? Like that. So kind of running it across and pulling on it. The problem is this is soft in some spots and not soft in others. So I'm trying to walk it very gently across here. It was a little bit more bend than I wanted. Okay, I didn't quite get the right diameter in there, but I'm going to try again over here. Okay, working a little better with more fine control, I think. Okay, these are real off right now. This one's got a sharper bend in the beginning, so I'm going to put that there. Okay, and that's a little aggressive, I think, so I'm going to bend that back out. Yeah, this didn't get heat treated evenly. One of these legs is a lot softer than the other leg, so having to kind of wiggle it here. Okay, I think I'm putting a little too much bend in here. That was a little bit faster than I want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to just take a little bit of it out. I'm just going to do that with my hands. Okay, now I'm starting to see how it's going to hang in here. Alright, so I'm kind of getting somewhere. It's a little weird, but I've got this mess of wire. I know it doesn't look like that much because most of the curvature I've been putting in is right here. So this thing, the torch is going to slip in here and go in like that. And so you can see there, hopefully, that it's kind of curling over. And then these two pieces that are kind of going crazy right now, I want to lay them over here. I'm going to put a little curl on the back, and then that's where I'm going to weld them. So this thing is going to sit right here. Doesn't look like much right now, but hopefully it'll look like something awesome. Alright, so I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to weld it in now, and then this mess I'm going to rearrange it, rebend everything, and get the loops on, and then weld those up after. But I think what I need to do now is I need to get this on the base, and it's starting to look right there, and then I'll mess with the other stuff and get it how I want it. So I think we're switching over to welding now. Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. I think we're gonna do that. Alright, so this is definitely gonna be the most difficult part. I have it clamped up here, and you see how there's this really thick base with a really tiny piece of wire on top? That is a very difficult weld to do because you have to melt the base piece, put enough heat in it to melt the base, the thick part, and then have it just barely touch the wire without burning up the wire. It's gonna be hard. I'm gonna definitely do some practice runs. I'm gonna do a little bit of research on it too before I start it. So, all right, that may have been the most intense welding I've ever done, and I've run into an issue. I've been trying to weld this gauge of wire onto a flat bar to practice the welds that I was gonna do to the wire. Problem is, I finally got it to where I could get the arc get the pool of molten metal to kind of match in between this and then the solid piece underneath. I was able to finally get them to kind of pull together, even though I was working on a thinner piece, which is easier than the thicker piece that I machined. But what happens is if I'm welding right here, the heat runs out of this, and then right where it's not supported, where there's no more heat sink underneath, so where there's no more material, so if my fingers were the material, it would melt right here because the heat would run out of it, it would heat this up too much, and then it just falls and breaks. And I don't even need to try it, I know that's going to happen to this thing that I have right here. So I'm not sure what to do. I also burned a bunch of holes in my pants by letting this hang and touch my pants. I burned like 5 holes in these pants. Alright guys, ask me how I did that. Go ahead, ask me. I'm waiting. This right here is a piece of TIG wire welded to a solid piece. So remember how I said that I couldn't do that? Just like, of course you remember, it was 2 seconds ago. That night, I felt dejected. I'm like, man, I might have to throw this video out. I can't figure out how to do this. I also had little gag. I was gonna be like, maybe I just super glue it to it. Fortunately, I don't have to use super glue because I figured out how to do it. Any guesses how? Foil. I got this idea from some video I watched online. They weren't using it exactly like this. They were using it more to make a seal. But I'm like, this would probably make a heat sink. So what I did is I just wrapped it around this like this, and I squished it up on here, and I actually used it to hold it in position and to heat sink it. And I pushed it on real good like that. I did it on the other side, and it melted off, but I didn't have it pushed up as much, and I got really close to the edge on that. So I think it's on the side that melted off. So as long as I think I stay a little bit off the edge, stay in the middle, and then really wrap this up with foil and make sure it's touching the base piece, I don't think we're gonna melt it in half, and I think we can do this. So I'm gonna get some wires cut. I'm gonna run a couple more practice of these, do this thing a couple more times, and then we're gonna get to fucking welding this thing. Hell yeah. Look at all my practice things. Look at these things just falling off of here. Alright guys, here is the setup. I have these two clamps clamping down this bar right here. I have them clamped real nice and tight so there's really good fit up between those parts. And then around all of here and over here, I wrapped it in foil. I used like pieces and I built it up like clay. And then I came through the middle and I attached it here. And if you can see, down in there is the wire. Like right there is the wire. Right there. And so I'm going to weld in, I'm going to start my pull up here, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to touch right here. So start up here and then come down and touch right there. And I have this foil on the back here to keep the back pull heat out of the wire, and hopefully it won't melt as easily. I think we're ready to go for it, guys. Fucked it up. So what did we learn, guys? We learned that this is hard to weld. That's what we learned. I thought, I mean, I did this at the end after I knew I already ruined it. I'm like, I'm gonna see if I can melt it together, and then this broke off too. So I think I had my amperage turned way too high, and I was assuming that I could just use the bottom of the pedal. I also didn't really give a fuck because I already blown it up. Here, let me explain what happened. So as I was running this bead, the art just jumped right up into here, and I'm not sure you can see that, but it just blew in half this piece of wire that I was trying to weld to. It just burned it right in half. Didn't work, and I left a giant weld puddle on the thing, so it didn't look that pretty anyway. I could have maybe have tried to tack it in there and made it work, but I didn't want to have something super ugly sitting on my bench forever. So, you know, it didn't work. Things that did work was the machining. The machining was all pretty well done. If you well, if you watched the video, you probably watched that part. So just watch that part because the welding did not go well. The machining looked good. The internal diameter of this came out pretty good. Huh, I can see where I was melting. I melted through and deformed the inside of this. That's another good thing to note. You can penetrate too deeply apparently with this stuff. The entire reason I'm building this and working on these videos is and learning to weld is I'm going to make a Iron Man suit out of aluminum. So this kind of stuff I got to figure out, and so I'm starting with it here, you know, to make myself learn, and then I'll figure out how to weld, and then I'll be able to be better at putting the suit together. So I'm trying to weld this suit out of aluminum, which is a big ass because aluminum's really fucking hard to weld. So you can watch the rest of my videos if you're interested in that. I do a daily vlog on that. I do these how-to videos and stuff, kind of secondary, but or how not to in this case. Now it's now the name of this video is how not to weld a TIG torch out of wire, because I did not weld a TIG torch out of wire. Machining went well. I don't really know how to weld this. I have to see. I think if I get down to really low amperage, you could potentially weld something, and you could do a sculpture entirely out of this because you're working with the same gauge. But what happens when you do a lap joint like this? Lap joints are some of the most difficult joints to do because you have to get them into the corner. Like you need penetration all the way down, like where my thumb is. You need penetration all the way down to where they meet. So right all the way down to the corner, you need penetration in there. The hard part about that is getting that in there. When you do a wire, though, it's even more difficult because now you have more undercut you need to come in and fill in. And so welding a wire like that is really, really difficult. And obviously, I do not know how to do it, especially when you're welding on something like this. When I've welded together wire, and I just had it down. I had my machine turned down to the lowest setting you can get to, which is only 30 amps. And then I touched it with the torch, and I just kind of bzzz, and it would just melt these two, and they would essentially, though, completely melt into each other and become a single unit. So that's obviously different than trying to like get in there at like 5 amps or something in there and get really thin wire and actually try to fill that in there, which is what I had in my mind. I thought, oh, I can do that. How hard can that be? Apparently pretty fucking difficult. I brought some really thin wire to try to do that, and then if I had a machine that could go down to 5 amps, it might be possible. It might be possible if you had a higher amp machine to get in there really tight, maybe even some thinner tungsten, get in there with some magnifiers. I have magnifiers in my hood now, which definitely help, but get in there with that and probably get in there with that thin metal. You might be able to do it, but I can't do it with my machine, apparently. I could probably tack this stuff together. No, it's not well. I can maybe try this again with like a 1 diameter thicker. The reason I was trying to do this is I knew I could make it really strong because my goal was to take it like this and then come in and like loop pieces around and weld them all in there. And I knew what I wanted to do was this really delicate looking thing that was also really strong. That's what I wanted to do. And that in theory would have worked. And I know it would have been strong, but welding it was obviously more difficult than that. So yeah, I wish I could tell you something like I knew exactly how to do this. I think a lower amp machine, I think more skill than what I have, and I think there was something to this aluminum, but it still blew it right out. So, or to the foil, I think there's something to that, but it just still ate right into that. And I'm not sure why I was able to get it on the bar, but not on this. Maybe this was acting as a bigger heat sink and sopping up more heat, and so that arc just jumped, and there was way too much heat and just cooked that part. So, I don't know how to do it. I'll figure it out, maybe. I might return to trying to weld wire. It's not something I really need to do. I was really just doing it because it was going to be very challenging for me to figure out how to do this, obviously. Apparently a little too challenging. And then my goal is if I can weld this, I can definitely weld a suit because this has got to be really hard to weld. The first part of that statement is true. But I can't do it yet. So I think the next project I'm going to start is going to be a welding cart, and that's going to be more traditional thickness of metal and flat metal, or like it's going to be made out of bar stock, and I'm going to weld that. So that'll probably be a little bit better at testing my skills and actually maybe succeeding at that one. Maybe. I should definitely succeed at that one. If I fail at that one, I'm going to be fucking really disappointed. So that's going to be the next project I start, and I'll probably give myself a couple days to get over this failure, and then go buy some stock from them and get cracking on that, because I want to do that. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to my channel. I do a lot of stuff like this. Subscribing to me will be a learning process, obviously, from this, because I'm learning how to do a lot of this stuff as I go. I'm a decent machinist already, and I kind of knew what I was doing with that. I had literally no idea how to TIG this before, and I'll make videos about that, and then I'll learn, and I'll actually make videos about stuff I actually know how to do. Like I said, I'm gonna do a tool cart or a welding cart for my welder, and I'm not sure the exact design I want for that yet, but like I said, I think pretty fucking sure I can do that. I think that's within my wheelhouse to do that. I've been practicing, as I was welding this, I was just doing a lot of welding practice, and I'm getting a lot better at just running beads and stuff on flat stock, not on wire, obviously. But I think that's going to be a successful one, so hit subscribe, smash the subscribe button. Also, I'm building an Iron Man suit, so that's pretty fucking cool, and so you'll be able to follow that as well. You guys are great. I love you guys. Peace.